Hi everyone, welcome to my theatre. In this movie, we will be discussing about the anatomy of the retina, part 2, which is the sagittal section of the retina. Okay? So when we talk about the sagittal section of the retina, it means we have cut the eye like this and we are trying to appreciate the layers of the retina. Well, to appreciate the layers of the retina, I will be giving you a very beautiful understanding which will tell you about more than 90% of the layers, which will tell you about all the layers of the retina. What is that? Well, let's have a discussion. When we talk about the coats of the eyeball, what do we say? We say inner neural coat, which means the retina is the inner neural coat, which means it's all about the neurons in the retina. When it's all about the neurons, then what do? They transmit the nerve impulse. Why? Because the function of the retina is to see, and for us to see, the impulse has to reach the brain. So what retina does is, it receives the signal with the light signal, then transfers it into the electricity and transmits it into the brain through the optic nerve. The way we have this water energy in the dam converted into electricity, the way we have solar energy which is converted into electricity, in a similar way, in the retina, we receive the light energy and there are neurons which convert this light energy into electricity, and that electricity is transferred into the brain through the optic nerve, and that's how we see. Now, I will tell you a very beautiful thing. If you remember about the anatomy in the first year, the things that you have learned in your first year, then you know that each and every neuron has three parts. One is the dendrite, which receives the signal. Second is the cell body, which processes the information. And third is the axon, which transmits the signal into the next neuron. So now in the eye, there is one kind of neuron which receives the signal, but that's a specialized neuron. Why? Because we are not receiving electric signal. We are receiving light signal, and that light has to be converted into electricity so that it can be transmitted into the brain. So the first kind of neuron receives the light signal and they convert it into electricity. The second neuron, which is present in between, it transfers that and gives it to the third neuron. And finally, that third neuron transfers it to the brain and we see. It means there are three neurons. One neuron converts the light into electricity. The second neuron transfers this electricity into the third neuron, and that third neuron takes it to the brain so that we can see. Okay. So now let's try to understand this picture. Okay. This is the inner side. This is the inner side of the retina, which means here we have the vitreous. This is the vitreous. Okay. So this is the vitreous side, and this thing is the choroid side. Okay. So what happens is, when we see, the light comes from the lens. It passes through the first cell, the second cell, and the third cell, but nothing happens. But when the light reaches the photoreceptor layer, here the lights get converted into the electrical signal. And that happens in the photoreceptors. Okay. Next, this electrical signal is transferred into the second neurons, like these are the second neurons. Here the light is transferred through the second neuron, and then finally it reaches the third neuron, which is the ganglion cell neuron. The ganglion cell neuron. which will transfer it to the brain through the optic nerve. Clear? Now how do we know about the layers? I told you about these 3 neurons because 9 layers of the retina are all about these 3 neurons. You will say how? Okay, first let us discuss about the second layer. The outermost layer in the retina is the retinal pigment epithelium. Let's know it as a piece of information. Here in the choroid side, we have this retinal pigment epithelium. We have the retinal pigment epithelium which is adjacent to the rods and cones. That is the layer number 1. Okay. Next, we have these photoreceptor cells. This outer segment of the photoreceptor, they form the photoreceptor layer, the second layer of the retina. So this one they form the second layer of the retina. Now, this photoreceptor cell, they have this nuclei, the cell body of those nuclei, they form the outer nuclear layer. Remember, anything which is towards the choroid is always outer, and anything which is towards the vitreous is always inner. So here we have the cell body of the photoreceptor cells and they form the outer nuclear layer. The outer nuclear layer. Okay. Next, we know that this photoreceptor has to communicate this message to the bipolar cells. So the axons of the photoreceptor cells and the dendrites of the bipolar cells, they meet in a layer and they form a plexus which is known as the outer plexiform layer. And these bipolar cells, they also have a cell body, the nucleus, and what do they form? They form again a nuclear layer. And what is that? We are already done with the outer nuclear layer. So now this one is the inner nuclear layer. So this one is the inner nuclear layer. Okay. And then the bipolar cell, the axons and the ganglion cell dendrites again form another plexus. So now what will that plexus be called? We are already done with the outer plexiform. So now this plexus is inner plexiform layer. This one is inner plexiform layer. Okay. And then after that, we have these cell bodies which form the ganglion cell layer. The cell bodies which form the ganglion cell layer, and the axons of those ganglion cell layers, they form the nerve fiber layer. The axons, they form the nerve fiber layer which actually finally forms the optic nerve. There are 2 more layers which we need to know. One is the internal limiting membrane and one is the external limiting membrane. Where is the internal limiting membrane present? As the name suggests, it is the innermost layer. So it is present even inner to the nerve fiber layer. Okay, this is where the internal limiting membrane is present. Where is the external limiting membrane present? It is present adjacent to the photoreceptor layer. So rods and cones we have, and so it is present. We usually remember it like a hat. Here, we have it here. External limiting membrane. Okay. So it is just inside the photoreceptor layer. So this is a very beautiful understanding of how we can remember all the layers of the retina only by the help of 3 nerves. So the first nerve will form the photoreceptor layer, the outer nuclear layer, the outer plexiform layer, and then the nucleus will form inner nuclear layer, and then the plexus will form the inner plexiform layer, then the cell body will form ganglion cell layer, and then those axons will form the nerve fiber layer. Again, the innermost is the inner nuclear layer, and the one which is just inside the photoreceptor is the external limiting membrane. Okay, but we understood it, but when we have to reproduce it in the exam, this may seem difficult. Even though we understood how the layers of the retina are formed, it is always wise to remember it with the help of a mnemonic. So I have created a mnemonic for you all. Let's learn it. The mnemonic for the layers of the retina from inside to outside. It's very important because this is the choroid. This is the choroid layer, which means it's the outside, and that's the vitreal side, which means that's inside. So the mnemonic for the layers of the retina is Il, Nehra, the cricketer Nehra, got, IPL, innings, opening on England Premier pitch. Okay, so Nehra was ill, but still Il Nehra got the IPL innings opening on England Premier pitch. What does IL stand for? It's internal limiting membrane. Okay, this IL is the internal limiting membrane, which is this one. Now, what does Nehra stand for? It's the nerve fiber layer. Nehra is this one, the nerve fiber layer. Then what does GOT stand for? It's ganglion cell layer. Okay, this one and this one. It's the ganglion cell layer. And what does IPL stand for? It's inner plexiform layer. This one, the inner plexiform layer. Now, what does inning stand for? It is inner nuclear layer. This one is the inner nuclear layer. Now, what is opening? It is outer plexiform layer. This one, the outer plexiform layer. Then on is outer nuclear layer. This one is the outer nuclear layer. Then England is external limiting membrane. This one is the external limiting membrane. And Premier is the layer of photoreceptors. This is the photoreceptor. And pitch is the retinal pigment epithelium. Okay. So, Il Nehra got IPL innings opening on England Premier pitch. Internal limiting membrane, nerve fiber layer, ganglion cell layer, inner plexiform layer, inner nuclear layer, outer plexiform layer, outer nuclear layer, external limiting membrane, photoreceptors, and retinal pigment epithelium. So, with the help of mnemonic as well as with the help of understanding, I hope that we will be extremely thorough with the layers of the retina, which is very, very and very important for your entrance exam as well as for your theory exam. Now, sometimes this is also a concept which is very important. Many times it has been asked in the entrance exams. So I thought to put this picture, and now what we need to know in this picture, which is a histopathology picture of the retina, is how do we appreciate the layers of the retina. Here I will tell you few tips and tricks on how you can appreciate the layers of the retina. First and the foremost thing which we need to know when you are given a retinal layer pictures is to appreciate the inner side, the vitreous side and the choroid side. In this picture, this is the choroid side. Well, I'll also tell you how to know if nothing is mentioned, then how to know which one is the choroid side and which one is the vitreous side. I'll tell you. This one is the choroid side and this one is the vitreous side. Okay. So now, how do we know? When we are given a histopathology picture, if we see brown colored ill-defined margin pigments, then it is choroid, because that is melanin. See, here you can see that we have brown colored ill-defined structures, so many brown colored ill-defined structures, and along with that we also have the cut end of the blood vessels. So first and foremost thing to notice is this, the brown colored ill-defined structure and the blood vessels. The moment we see this, we call it choroid. Fine? That is rule number 1. Rule number 2. When we see the purple color well-defined structures, which is actually hematoxylin eosin stain structures, when we see the purple colored well-defined structures, then they are the nuclear layers. So what are the nuclear layers here? We have see, anything which is adjacent to the choroid is going to be outer, and anything which is inside near the vitreal side is going to be inner. So now this one is adjacent to the choroid, so it is the outer nuclear layer, and then we see another well-defined layer of well-defined structures, hematoxylin eosin stain. So this is inner nuclear layer, and finally the innermost structure is the ganglion cell layer. So basically we have 3 structures. One is the outer nuclear layer, the inner nuclear layer, and finally the ganglion cell layer. This is how we will know the nuclear layers. And then obviously anything which is adjacent to the ganglion cell layer towards the vitreous, it has to be nerve fiber layer. So the one which is adjacent to the ganglion cell layer is the nerve fiber layer. And anything which is in between the ganglion cell and the inner nuclear is inner plexiform, and anything which is in between the inner nuclear and the outer nuclear is outer plexiform. Okay? And then how do we appreciate the photoreceptors? We have to just appreciate the retinal pigment epithelium. And now how do we appreciate the retinal pigment epithelium? We know that retinal pigment epithelium also has melanin, which means it needs to have something which is brown in color. See here, again you will see some brown structures. With the help of that, you can appreciate the retinal pigment epithelium, and the layer which is adjacent to it is photoreceptors. So with the help of these rules, the rule number 1, which says that any ill-defined brownish structures along with the cut end of the blood vessels is choroid. Rule number 2, well-defined hematoxylin eosin stain purple colored structures are the nuclear layers, which are the outer nuclear, the inner nuclear and the ganglion cell layer. Rule number 3, the one which is above the ganglion cell layer, it has to be nerve fiber layer. Rule number 4, in between the nuclear layers, we will have the plexiform layers. Rule number 5, we need to appreciate the retinal pigment epithelium, which will be again small brownish pigments because of the presence of melanin in RPE. And the one which is adjacent and just inside it is the photoreceptor layers. So this is how, with the help of these few tricks, you can appreciate the layers of the retina when you are given the histopathology image of it. Fine? Okay. Now, okay. So this is the mnemonic for that. Okay, now, okay. The story doesn't end here. Why? Because it's not only about the retina, it's also about the fovea, the foveola and the macula. The retina has 10 layers, but fovea and foveola, they don't have 10 layers. fovea in fact has only 5 layers, and foveola has 6 layers, and macula has 10 layers as rest of the retina. Okay. So the fovea has 5 layers, foveola has 6 layers, and the macula has 10 layers. Now, what are the layers in the fovea? Well, any part of the retina will have the internal limiting membrane and the external limiting membrane. Okay, we are done with 2 layers. Second tip, we know that fovea has the photoreceptor layer which has cones. So the photoreceptor layer will also be present in the fovea. And what is the cell body of the photoreceptor? It is the outer nuclear layer. That also needs to be present. And finally, the RPE. The RPE is also present in the entire retina. So these are the 5 layers which is present in the fovea. How do you remember? First is the 2 limiting membranes, the RPE, and then the photoreceptor and its nucleus. Okay. So the layers of the fovea are we also have a mnemonic for it. And what is the mnemonic? Ill on England Premier Pitch. Okay, so this is the mnemonic for the fovea. We had a very huge mnemonic for the layers of the retina, and here we have a small mnemonic for the layers of the fovea, a part of that mnemonic, and that is Ill on England Premier Pitch. That is the internal limiting membrane, outer nuclear layer, and then the external limiting membrane, photoreceptor layer, and the RPE. But as I explained you, the internal limiting membrane, the external limiting membrane, and the retinal pigment epithelium are present throughout the retina. We need to remember that. And along with that, we just have to remember that they have photoreceptors and the cell body of those photoreceptors, that is the outer nuclear layer. Okay. Now, what is the extra layer that is present in the foveola? Just tell me, if the signal is transmitted till the outer nuclear layer and we don't have the outer plexiform layer, then how will it finally be transmitted to the optic nerve? So the extra layer which is present in the foveola is the outer plexiform layer. The extra layer which is present in the foveola is the outer plexiform layer. And finally, the macula has all the 10 layers. Well, this is very important to understand. Why? Because there are so many diseases, the understanding of which can be derived from this concept. And also, because of that, do you see the angulation here? Why is there this angulation? This angulation is because when the signal is transmitted in the macula, it finally, when it goes to the macula, from fovea to macula, it goes through the foveola, and the foveola have this outer plexiform layer, and since the inside the foveola doesn't have, it has to depend upon the foveola, and because of which that angle is created. Now the image falls, it has been converted into electricity, but then how do we go to the rest part of the retina? That happens through the outer plexiform layer of the foveola, and that is the reason why this angle is created, and that is also the reason why we have this depression. Since all the layers are not present in the foveola, we have this depression which we call the umbo. This understanding in the layer of retina is very, very important. So I hope I could explain you as well as give you some tips to remember the layers of the retina. As I said, you need to have ball in both of your hands, which means you need to understand the concept and simultaneously you also need to remember the mnemonic. The mnemonic is a last moment thing because it will help you to very quickly apply things in your exam, and understanding is for lifetime. I made you understand how the layers of the retina are formed and also gave you the mnemonic, and I made you understand why the macula has only 5 layers and I also gave you the mnemonic. And I also made you understand how fovea has one more extra layer and macula has all the layers. I hope you enjoyed the video, and we will meet in the next lecture where we will be discussing about some extra points about few of the layers of the retina. Do like, share and subscribe and encourage me. Let's catch up soon.